Hey, IOStax here. A lot of players ask me the same question over and over again. How can I get better aim? Sadly, there is only one solution. Some call this the act of practicing, but there are several other very important aspects about aiming that you should know about. Sweat baby, sex is a text. This is the wrong script. First, let's get into the way aiming actually works. There are three zones that you can use to aim: your fingers, your wrist, and your arm. Depending on your mouse grip, finger aiming may be constrained though. I use a claw grip so I have full control over all three zones, but someone with a palm grip may sacrifice finger aiming for a huge boost in comfortability. So if you can't aim with your fingers due to your grip, just ignore the finger aiming parts in this video. Now, this is where the benefits of lower sensitivities come into play. If you have a really high sensitivity, chances are you will only ever use your fingers, maybe a little bit of your wrist for turns. If you have a really low sensitivity, then you will mainly use your arm, which is exhausting and not optimal either. You want to have a sensitivity that uses all three zones. You want to make micro adjustments with your fingers, like aiming at the head instead of the body, track or flicking with your wrist, depending on what character you play, and use your arm for big turns. So what are the benefits of using three separate zones? One for fine adjustments, one for tracking, flicking, and one for turning. They act as a sort of image stabilization. Your arm and wrist roughly track the target instinctively, and you can then use your fingers, or your wrist depending on your grip again, to make slight adjustments like reacting to small strafes or in order to shoot at the neck instead of the legs. That's why it's important to make sure that you practice everything: your arm aiming, your wrist aiming, and your finger aiming, so that they can work together in-game. And this is where we get to the sauerkraut of the video. We want to find that sensitivity that perfectly fits you as a person and your mousepad. Don't simply copy pro sensitivities. You can use them to start off, but never think that your sensitivity is bad because it is higher or lower than what your favorite pro uses. Gaming at a high level is about feeling comfortable, and everyone is different here. So how can we find the perfect sensitivity? The idea is that your brain has instincts, routines it accesses if it doesn't have enough data to make an educated decision. But enough of that mumbo jumbo. When you start playing on the day, you will know that your aim is probably pretty bad. You over-aim a lot, sometimes you can't quite track very well, and your flicks are all over the place. Or eventually you warm up, either because you do it beforehand in the practice range or on quick play, or because after your first or second competitive game your brain adjusted and it now knows the reality of how far your hand needs to move for a motion in-game. We want to minimize that warm-up time. We want to find the sensitivity where your brain feels right at home and can instinctively correlate on-screen movement with hand movement. For that, we are going to use the PSA method, the perfect sensitivity approximation. A methodology that is used in arena shooters like Quake and is still used and recommended in games like Counter-Strike. I need to say this right now. The point of this is to get a sensitivity that you feel comfortable with and that you don't need to warm up as much for. So it is very important that you are not warmed up. Ideally, you want to do this before your first game of the day. If you are warmed up, then you won't find your perfect sensitivity. You will just find the sensitivity you warmed up for. First, you need to have some preparations. Try to get an Excel sheet or some actual paper and maybe a calculator. Actually, ditch that maybe, you definitely need a calculator, and enter the practice range. Now, Blizzard is going to kick you in the nuts a little here, because apparently not doing something for 5 seconds immediately kicks you out of the practice range, so prepare to re-enter it a lot of times. First, stand still and move your mouse from the far left of your mousepad to the far right. Then adjust your sensitivity until that movement equals exactly one 360-degree turn. The reason why we use this as a started sensitivity is so that we can make a clean 180 while still having enough space in case we need to go beyond that, aka we won't run out of mousepad. Now that you have this starting sensitivity, write it down. Then to the left of it you write that value multiplied by 0.5, and to the right of it multiplied by 1.5. These are your high and low values respectively. Now, the three aiming zones from earlier come into play. You want to find out which sensitivity you like more, the lower or the higher one. First, select your low value and position yourself in front of a static bot. Stand relatively far away from it and strafe left and right using an unpredictable pattern while aiming, with nothing but your fingers. Imagine you were playing with a cast because you broke your arm. Only use your fingers. Next, get a little closer and try to aim using only your wrist. And lastly, get really close and walk around the target trying to track that using only your arm. After that, you combine all of those, walking towards and away from the target and using all three: your arm, your wrist, and your fingers to track the target, depending on how far away you stand. I do each of these steps for around a minute, meaning that after 4 to 5 minutes I am done checking the low sense. Make sure that you have time. This may take a while, but it is worth it, trust me. Alright, now do the exact same thing with the high sensitivity you noted on earlier. One of those will feel better, and I want you to choose which one. Be honest. Choose what you find felt better. Don't choose the value that is closer to what the pros use. Now let's say you chose the lower value. Type the lower value down in the middle, and this time add your preferred value to your old mid value and divide it by 2. So basically the average between your new value and your old value. Now multiply this new value, the average, by 0.5 and 1.5 to find your low and high values. Test both of them and choose the one that you think felt better. Keep in mind that these new high and low values may feel worse than your mid value, but we will approximate to that value anyway, so don't be afraid of skipping over the value you think fits you best. Now, once again, test both values for around 10 minutes total and honestly, select the one which felt better. Now, keep repeating this, but with each iteration, let the factor approach 1, so times 1.5, 1.4, 1.3, and times 0.5, 0.6, 0.7. Now you have your perfect sensitivity. A sensitivity that is intuitive and that your brain doesn't need to adjust to for as long, and one that maximizes your usage of arm, wrist, and finger aiming. Keep in mind that this method can have slight differences depending on how you feel that day. If you are tired, it will feel slightly different. If you are hungry or thirsty, it can feel slightly different. The differences, however, should be minor. I recommend doing this multiple times actually. You can do this every 2 days up to 3 times, for example, just to make sure that the values you get are consistent. Alright, so why did we do all this? Because it's your own personal sensitivity. You aren't just blindly copying from others. You have a sensitivity that works best for you and that you feel comfortable with. Your brain feels comfortable with it, even if you haven't played with it in a while, because it is just intuitive. And by using your arm, wrist, and fingers, you make sure that you get the most out of your body. Now that you have the perfect sensitivity, it will still take some time to adjust, but it is definitely worth it. I hope that this helped you feel more comfortable with your sensitivity. After all, Overwatch is a first-person shooter, so from time to time you need to aim in order to execute your game plan. Alright, my name is Shoutout, and I'd like to thank you for learning.